The virtual conference Live Talks is the brainchild of Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman. It was initially developed as an emergency education channel to help professionals and general public manage their emotional and psychological response to the pandemic of 2020 by hosting the world's leading psychologists, researchers, and authors, and providing a platform for nano-live-workshops. It is now expanded into becoming a showcase for people to share their work and ideas in order to educate and inspire us to follow our own personal paths of value. Now please welcome your host, Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman.
Hello and welcome to Virtual Conference Live Talks from myself, Dov Benyaacov-Kurtzman. And welcome. Already we've got Lorraine saying hello, and welcome to Lorraine, and anyone else joining us. Please don't forget to like, share, tag, whatever it is that you can do to get everybody on here. Of course, if you have any questions or comments for our guest speaker, please put them in the comments now. Our guest speaker tonight is absolutely amazing and couldn't be, I think, more relevant for the times that we're in. Authors of many books, including Escaping the Emotional Roller Coaster, which I think is relevant because we're probably all on an emotional roller coaster right now, and also Living Beyond OCD with Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, which is very dear to lots of our viewers' hearts. And so without further ado, I'm going to ask Dr. Patricia Zurita Ona, who likes to be known as Dr. Z. Now, with a Scottish accent, it would normally be called Dr. Z, but she prefers Dr. Z. So we'll call her Dr. Z, and I'll practice that at willingness from my broad Scottish accent. I can't wait to talk to her. She's an amazing person, an amazing author, an amazing psychologist, and I think it'll be a wonderful treat for you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Z.
Hi, Ben. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, wonderful. It's absolutely amazing to have you. And especially at this time where it's not just about a small population of people that we're talking about the whole world here. And one of the main reasons I started this virtual conference was to bring people like yourself who have years of knowledge, years of learning, years of experience, and it culminates in wisdom that you're used to using for your client group, I would say. But what I would like to use it for is for the general public, is for the world, is for people watching this, no matter where they are and who they are and whether they suffer from any other disorders or emotional roller coasters or not. It's just that we're all going through it right now, aren't we? And the world is in a bit of a turmoil, whether you're on lockdown, whether you're not on lockdown. And I really wanted to bring in people like yourself to help us, basically help all of us.
Yeah, I think I really, really appreciate what you're sharing on the sense that whether a person has a diagnosed anxiety struggle like social anxiety or OCD or specific phobia, all of us who are regulating our responses to our emotions. And given all what's going on in our context, socially speaking, politically speaking, nature, our mood is also affecting. We're experiencing large amounts of fear, which is very adaptive. We're scared about the future. We have wishes about how things were before the pandemic. We have hopeful thoughts about how we hope things will be. But all of that comes with all these sometimes overwhelming emotions that I can really feel like a roller coaster, exactly as you were saying, right? That sometimes we have mini roller coasters, sometimes we have like big ones. But these days, I think for all of us, we are doing the best we can to regulate those responses. And I think the biggest thing that I have witnessed that it's important to emphasize is that some moments we are going to feel okay and things are manageable, and other moments we feel scared and we get anxious. So I think making room for all that emotional experience that is coming for us without having to judge it or judge ourselves, without having to criticize it or criticize ourselves, is super important to go through this very strange moment that we're living.
Well, absolutely. And I don't know, I'm not an expert in OCD, but there's a lot of talk around these days because of this. Well, first of all, it's a requirement that we all wash our hands on a regular basis and many, many times a day. But on the top of that, there is a little bit of anxiety that if we don't wash our hands, something bad is going to happen. And some people might take that much more, what would you say, extreme than others. And how, like if you, washing your hands should be a general hygiene thing anyway in the regular world. But there's some people that are washing their hands now, every few minutes because they don't know if they're going to get a virus or not going to get a virus and so on. How similar is that to somebody who's suffering from OCD, that their compulsions are to wash their hands?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that question. Has been a crucial question, right? The last couple of months as the pandemic unfolds. One of the things is to clarify is when we think about OCD, we're thinking about these very unwanted, annoying thoughts that are hard to let go. It's like your body and your brain is on shake and you cannot move with the next thing, right? And there are different themes of obsessions, right? There are people who are afraid about saying the wrong thing. There are people who have aggressive obsessions, people who have contamination obsessions or fear about contracting germs. So the ways in which the brain could latch into an obsession is limitless, right? So I think these days experiencing fear is a very adaptive response, and it's driving also specific behaviors like washing our hands, right? And following the guidelines of the health organizations. When dealing with OCD, if a person is struggling with fears of contamination, naturally this is going to be amplified by the pandemic, right? And people may have urges that not only follow what the healthcare organizations say, but do it so much more than that, because they may engage in compulsive behaviors, right? So I think what I have been encouraging my clients is that there is a difference between an adaptive response, which we have to follow because the health organizations are recommending us to do that to be safe, versus doing because it's driven by this excessive fear of contamination or contracting germs, right? Now, that's not an easy, I think, task to discriminate, right? Why do I have this urge to wash my hands? So what we have been encouraging clients with OCD is to follow the guidelines of the health organizations, minimize contact to any other sources many times that the media may have out there, because there can be a lot of misinformation. And sometimes also other sources are amplifying what the baseline of fear that we already have, right? So I think the distinction is, why am I doing this washing my hands? Is it because I'm following the guidelines of the health organization, or is it because I am giving into this obsession I have about the fears of contamination, right?
So yeah, the first of all, as you said, it's sometimes not easy to make that distinction, but there will be a fear, I think, in some people who have not been known to suffer from OCD, that might be thinking there's something wrong with them because they have this urge now, because they're following guidelines, but there's still an urge. How many times should I be doing it per day? Am I doing it enough? Not doing enough? Can we assure them that they don't have OCD, or is this something that could turn into OCD?
That's a great question. That's a great question. I have been asked the same question by clients and even some friends about it. Is it possible that this pandemic led people to develop OCD-like behaviors or a full-blown of OCD? So as a behavioral person, yes, it's possible. our brain again could latch into anything as an obsession and as a compulsion, right? So I think what is different here is that some people may have what we call anxiety sensitivity, which may be more prone actually to experience high levels of anxiety, right? They're looking at the world in terms of what's going to go wrong, what's unsafe. So it's no different than if someone is riding a bike and they fell down, could they develop a traumatic-based response because they fell off the bike? Yes, right? Everything is possible, right? Given the context that were happening, right? I think with time, distinguishing how this behavior is showing up in a person's life, how it's affecting their relationships, their career, what they are doing with their friends, what they're doing for fun, that is going to be important. But I think no one can say, no, if you're doing this, you don't have OCD. So I think people may have sometimes some responses given the context we're living. But we have to check what's the function of that happening, and in which context it's happening, and how much that's affecting them.
Okay, so that's wonderful. So there's always the possibility, and as behavioralists, we understand that that's always an option. But even if it does develop, or even somebody who does have OCD, how do you relate to that? And how does acceptance and commitment therapy relate to that? Is that person broken? Is there something wrong with them? Or do we relate to them in a different way?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. The frontline treatment for OCD and anxiety struggles is called exposure response prevention. And acceptance and commitment therapy by nature, it's an exposure-based frame, right? Because we're inviting our clients and ourselves to get in touch with the yuckiest stuff that comes just because we're human, right? It's not our fault. It's not that we're broken. It just happens that being human comes that we do get scared and we don't like to be in discomfort. So the way that I think, one is that Acceptance and Commitment Therapy Act, it's already an exposure intervention. And we still do a specific targeted exposures to help a person face any situation, activity, or object they are scared of. For example, if people are afraid about harming their babies, we will just take a look how that fear is affecting their life. My clients may say things like, I cannot spend time alone with my baby. I don't want to be in the kitchen when I'm holding my baby. I'm asking my husband to hold the baby. So we'll look at how that fear is driving behaviors that it's affecting their lives. And it's taking them far away from being the mother they want to be, right? So within that, we look at what's the value, what's important for them about being a mom, what are the qualities they want to show up with when raising and holding their babies, and what are the exposure exercises we could do to help them to face that situation, right? So we talk about how to approach our fears, what we're scared of, in the context of our values, in the context of the things that are important to us. And we talk about how it's important to be flexible with this exposure exercise. And again, ACT has a lot of exercises to do that, on the sense that it's not about doing it right or just getting it done or powering through. It's about, with gentleness, watching what's happening when you are in the kitchen holding your baby. What's showing up for you? What is your mind telling you? How does it feel in your body? Is it moving? Is it static? How do we respond to that right now? So I think it's really about encouraging people to approach what they're scared of at their rhythm, at their pace, knowing that, yes, we're going to get out of the comfort zone, but also building the willingness to approach with curiosity, with flexibility, and not too much with this powering through approach, which by nature we all may do, right? When there is a problem, we try to solve it, right? If I'm scared about this, I'm just going to face it, right? The challenge is that we are more interested, and that's where psychological flexibility comes. We're more interested in the process of approaching, in the house we're approaching, not just getting it done and say, okay, done, right? So I think that in the nutshell, that's what ACT and exposure targeted exercises will be doing if a person is dealing with OCD or with any form of anxiety.
Okay, wonderful. And I think there's a lot to talk about in a minute. Yeah, just to let you know that Tamar Friedlands is saying hello as well. There's quite a few people coming in, and usually we get viewers from all over the world tuning into this, whether they're on live on Facebook or YouTube, or whether they're watching the replays. So I ask anybody if they want to ask you any questions, that they can always ask them right now. What I'm interested in is how we can apply this great experience that you have, that's usually applied to a particular a group of people who are suffering from OCD. But how can we generalize this, if you like, for all of us that are going through such an emotional roller coaster as we are today? And I say it's quite, I mean, we use it as a metaphor, but it's almost quite a literal metaphor, because we're going to experience this lockdown situation. Then some of us are beginning to experience a situation where we might be coming out of lockdown. And then there's always that threat of going back into lockdown again. And, what we don't know if we're coming or we're going. And it does seem like it's these kind of roller coaster type rail tracks and looping the loop and goodness knows what else we all feel actually literally in our bodies sometimes. I mean, I know myself, just to use myself as an example, and I, when I go outside now, and we're particularly still in lockdown where I live, but we're allowed now to go outside for, exercise and walks and things. But even going out now, after being almost 3 months in a kind of a restricted freedom type manner, and almost like in a submarine, automatically there's a very kind of anxious kind of feeling when you're just even walking in the street. People are wearing masks, or they're not wearing masks. People are getting anxious when they see people with masks. People are getting anxious when they see them not wearing masks. All sorts of roller coaster type things going on. How can we use what you do and are so good at to help us get through this?
Mm-hmm. That's a beautiful question, Don. I really, really appreciate it. I think one of the things that happens is that when we get scared, when we get anxious, and especially now, as you're saying, we're going through this micro roller coaster, sometimes a big one. It is a natural thing. The mind may go into the future. What's going to go wrong? What's going to happen? The mind is going to go into lot of what if. What if this happens? What if this person gets close to me? What if something happens to my mask? What if this person coughs next to me, right? And the mind will also go into ruminating about the past. I want things to go back as they were. I just want to go back to have a sense of normalcy. The challenge is that when the mind takes us into the future and thinking what's going to go wrong, and into the past, we stop being in the present, right? And this is something for all of us, again, that it is a natural thing. Our brain, as a content generator, blah, 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 chop, 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 yappy, yappy, and as a pattern making machine, will take us into the future or into the past. It just happens that when we are trying to do grocery shopping, when I'm having this conversation with you, when you're spending time with that family, we miss that moment and we were trapped in our head. So given that, one of the things I encourage my clients, and this is something I have been practicing every single day for years, and especially now, is check when my mind is taking me into the future, right? Into the future or into the past, and try to unplug from that, taking a deep breath, pressing my feet maybe a little bit hard so I can use my body to unplug from my mind and ground myself back into the moment. So I think this idea, this skill about bringing ourselves back into what's happening in front of us, because there's always life happening around us, is super important right now. To keep going with the things that we need to be doing, to keep going on with the things that we care about, and to also answer the question, how do we want to show up to ourselves when things are feeling so yucky and so uncomfortable, right? So I think also responding with some gentleness and some caring to how we're feeling, and doing more soothing things, whether that's listening to music, whether that's smelling a flower, right? But I think when we bring ourselves back to the present, not only we can engage with the things that we care about, but we can also check again, how do I want to show up to this moment right now in which my body's feeling on edge? What's the caring thing I can do for myself right now? Because if we are too trapped on the future, on the past, we are forgetting that. We're just living in our head, right? So I think unplugging, bringing ourselves back to the present and checking how we want to show up in that moment is super important right now, more than ever.
So is there a lot of self-talk that goes on then? Are we talking about, if I'm in a situation where, well, first of all, got to kind of realize that, wait a minute, oops, I've jumped into the future here and I'm getting really anxious of what might happen. Should I now be using kind of that inner voice to try and examine what's going on, or what should I be saying to myself?
That's a great question, right? The way that I think about, I think sometimes we need to be using some acceptance prompts or little prompts that are going to coach us exactly how to bring ourselves back into the moment, right? Things like, how do I want to show up right now? Or what's upsetting to me right now? Those are mini prompts. And the reason why having a mini prompt it's necessary and helpful sometimes for some of us is because it's short and sweet versus trying to, why am I feeling this, right? What happened in my life, right? So there is a difference between acknowledging and describing what's happening with a mini prompt versus looking at the meaning of, right? So I think the meaning of will take us into rumination. And certainly at times in our life, who doesn't think about existential matters? It just happens that when we're feeling anxious and scared, may not be the most effective thing to do, right? So I think this self-talk that you're asking, beautiful question, I think it may come with mini prompts to ourselves. Okay, how do I want to shop right now? What's important right now? Right, or here comes my mind, right, with a disaster forecaster. Okay, I'm going to take a deep breath, right? I want to do the best I can, right? But I encourage something short and sweet. Now, for some people, when they're using the self-talk again, that's the prompt to go back to their bodies and take a deep breath, right? Maybe just massaging a little bit your neck, right? Or pressing your feet a little bit hard, right? But also, those are body cues that are going to help us that we can bring ourselves back into this moment with our body and then re-engage with what is outside of us, right? So I think self-talk by itself, it's nothing wrong with that, right? Of course, within ACT, I think it's important to look at how it works, right? One of the things I notice, again, if people go into a lot of trying to make the meaning of, right, in the moment when they're feeling anxious, that doesn't seem to be very effective because they can easily go into rumination, or in the case of OCD, they can go into compulsion, mental compulsions, right? Versus having mini self-talk as mini prompts about, okay, how do I want to show up? Very different, because they can unplug easily from the mind and refocus again.
Oh, I love that idea of the mini prompts. And I think that's something that we can all even prepare in advance. You know, we can all think of little mini prompts that are connected to our values and connected to how we want to behave, connected to, you know, if everything was really great in this world and I could do anything I wanted, what way would I want to behave under certain situations, and have these mini prompts there ready for us when we get into that kind of really anxious situation, to avoid going into all that, because our mind likes to jump into explaining everything and looking for things and wanting explanations and wanting to solve problems. And I love the idea of the mini prompts. I also like that great thing of touching like the back of your neck. What is that? That's really sounds really good. It's something I actually I don't know, but I've done this naturally for many years, that I kind of touch the back of my neck. What is that about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that happens is that sometimes we think that we need to have a quiet room to bring in ourselves back, right? And certainly that is helpful. We need that. But when I'm living my life day to day, when I'm going to do groceries, when I am driving, when I'm talking to you, right? I cannot just take off to a room that is going to be quiet, right? It doesn't work like that. There's a life to live, right? So
Right.
the idea of using our body, whether that's massaging your neck or pressing your feet or taking a deep breath, is about using your body to anchor yourself instead of being consumed by the mind. And all of us, we can have certain soothing and calming gestures that we can do, right? For some people, it can be taking a deep breath, right? That's the prompt that they need and the cue to bring themselves into the present. Other people may need something different, like for some of the clients, and certainly for myself, sometimes just really massaging my neck a little bit, right? Putting a little bit of pressure that brings me back again into the moment versus being consuming my mind, right? So my invitation is, when we're feeling scared, the body is on edge, but it's up to us to check how can we help our brain to slow down a little bit. And all of us are going to have different types of soothing actions that we can do with our fingers, right? Can be a type of deep breath, right? And those actions are going to help us to step back and then check, how do I want to show up in this yucky moment?
Oh, I'm absolutely loving this, because I like the idea. First of all, you mentioned these verbal prompts. You know, it's kind of a prompt to put us into that present moment, put us into the mode of, this is the way I'd like to behave now. But now you're talking about physical prompts, if you like, things that, you know, are anchors that if I do it, if this means to me that I'm going to distance myself and kind of give myself a verbal prompt, or this means to me that, you know, that I can behave in a certain way, or taking a deep breath. It's not just the action, if I understand it properly. It's the function of the action will kind of prompt me into a particular type of behavior. Is that right?
Yes, you say it very beautifully, right? I think there are different mini prompts that we can use, right? Verbal, then the physical ones. That all of that will give us the space to choose how to respond to this messy moment I am going through, right? Another prompt, for example, I invite my clients to use, and I certainly using as well, is, am I watching my mind, right? Am I watching? There's a huge difference when we are watching the mind versus being consumed by thinking, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Watching the mind, right? So that's another prompt sometimes to check, what am I doing? How am I relating to all this blah, blah, blah that is happening here?
Oh, that's wonderful. And you've just, I want to lead into asking you about yourself in a minute, but just let's go over here, because we've got Sherry Turrell saying hi, Dov and Patricia. Yeah, she's great. Hi, Sherry. Great to have you here. It's exciting. We've got Lorraine Otto from England saying this is very interesting information, that this empowers one to understand some of the signs and what the condition is. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an empowering thing, this kind of mini prompts, whether it's a physical one or it's a verbal one. Yeah, Norman Evans is also liking this idea. We've got a Facebook user. How can we expand our cognitive flexibility in a prolonged period of fear like Corona? Mary Moore from Israel. How can we expand that for a prolonged period, so it's ongoing all the time?
Yeah. So here is, and I'm sorry for saying this, but I'm a boring behaviorist, right? If it's okay, Mary, to maybe, when you think about cognitive flexibility, what you are thinking about? Because I would like to make sure I'm responding to the question, but I want to understand if it's possible.
Okay, so we'll ask Mary to come back and explain that a little bit better. Oh, Sherry's saying it's great to be here, and we love Sherry on this program too. Lorraine is asking a question saying, what can you do to distract someone who's anxious in that present moment? So when this is I think, a great question for you, because when someone's in the present moment, they might actually feel more anxious. So what do we do then?
Yeah. You see, I think it's a tough moment when we're feeling anxious and scared. And certainly our brain is wired to do all types of things to get us out of the situation, right? As quick as possible. The challenge is that when we do that, we are building not only the cycle of anxiety and stress, and our body feels it more, and we are not learning to make room for the yucky stuff, right? So I think I wish, sometimes there are certain degrees of anxiety. Like when I'm driving and I see something that may look like a dead animal, I don't look, right? I just know it's like my body goes like that because I get scared and I just don't want to look, right? But that doesn't affect my life. Is that a form of avoidance? Is that a form of distraction? Absolutely, yes. Because I just close my eyes and a little bit, not too much. I don't have a car accident. Just to clarify. But certainly that's a form of distraction and it's a form of avoidance. But it doesn't affect my life, right? So I think in the context when we're getting anxious and scared, especially these days, we're going to be doing all types of things. The question is, when do we do it and how it works? If what I am doing, if that avoidance, if that distraction is taking me away from how I want to show up to the people I love, to the work I have to do, to the fun stuff I'm trying to have, may not be effective, right? So I think more than how do you distract, the question is, when do I have to do that, right? And when do I have to sit with that? And by sitting, sometimes, we hear a lot, let's sit with that, right? By sitting with our distress means noticing and checking where it's in my body. Okay, my heart is beating fast. I have tingling sensations in my fingers, right? Or my legs are shaking a little bit. So sitting with the discomfort that comes is describing and noticing how it's showing up in our body. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's a little bit how I think, right? Checking always where this behavior is happening. It's helpful to me to get distracted and when it's not.
I think that's a wonderful distinction. Almost like, if I was going to put it in my words, what's the cost? What's it costing me? If it's costing me not very much because, I'm not looking at the horrible sight and I'm managing to drive on. So it didn't cost me that much in my life and it's fine. But if it's going to be destroying my relationships or it's going to be destroying my concentration on my work or whatever like that is, because there's a build up, then maybe it might be better to try and be more willing to experience this yucky stuff. And if I'm not mistaken, because in the long term, we might actually function better that way.
Yeah. So one of the things I want to add, and this apply again for all of us, and I think that's a beautiful way with this, is that approaching our fears for the sake of approaching could work, sure. But approaching our fears because it matters to us has actually incredible long-standing outcomes, right? But the other thing that I invite my clients is that, and I definitely, that's how I think I live my life, is about checking how we're relating to fear, how we're relating to thinking. So when we learn to actually sit with the discomfort, the yucky stuff that comes, we're also developing a new relationship with fear. We're developing a new relationship with thinking. And the more we do it, right, the more that we're going to be able to step back a little bit versus being consumed by a situation.
So I love that idea of trying to step back a little bit and kind of make a little room for the yucky stuff in our life. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. It's not normal or usual that we can kind of throw back on our experts a bit of their own medicine, but you're also going through this just like everybody else. So do you actually use this as you teach it on yourself?
I think Thank you for asking, Dov. And so here's the long response. I discovered ACT maybe 14, 16 years ago, and all what I can say has completely shaped my life, my career in so many ways. I don't know how to teach ACT skills to my clients or to my students without living them. So every single thing I am sharing here, it's something I use on a daily basis. So I think the pandemic is one situation that has create such an extraordinary context for all of us. And I'm a human being too. And I'm day by day sitting with my clients and what's coming up for them. But also I'm day by day sitting with myself and what comes for me. So I really don't know how to do ACT or teach ACT without living ACT. And I am a person also that I have a collection of fears about making mistakes, fears about saying the wrong thing, fears about choosing the wrong partner, panic attacks, right? Fears about dying in a car accident. So no human being walks without those fears. And I'm also another human being, in addition to be a therapist, right? So I think all these things I'm sharing with you is something that I certainly live day by day, moment by moment.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I think that's really important for people because, I mean, we could easily look at you and put you on a big, massive pedestal and say, "Oh, you're the all-knowing wisdom," and nothing ever happens to you. But this, what you've just shared with us, kind of brings it right down to our own eye level and say, "Look, you know what? You are just as human as us, and it's wonderful to see that you're doing this in your own life." And it kind of gives me the confidence to say, you know what, I would like to try some of this as well. What I really want for this program and the time that we've got left, and we'll go to some of the questions that we've got afterwards, but the idea of this was not just like a chat show. The idea of this was to be a bit of a nano workshop. In other words, tiny, tiny little time of something experiential, because that's what ACT is all about. Is there something experiential that we could do now? Somebody's asking even to give a little more ideas of what these mini prompts are and some sort of experiential exercise that we could all do right now with you.
That's a great question. Let me think for a moment. Because there's so many, I think, exercises that we do have, right? Yeah. So I think there is something I think sweet that we can do, right? Especially these days in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of everything shifting and experiencing all types of mini roller coasters and big roller coasters sometimes. Yeah. So if it's okay, we certainly can do something experiential. Can you, and everyone can hear me, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So in a couple of moments, I'm just going to invite you to do the best you can to sit in a relaxed position. If you are standing, make sure your body is straight, not necessarily tight. When you feel comfortable, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes for a couple of moments. If you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, it's okay to leave them open, maybe focusing on a single point. And for a couple of moments, let's do the best we can to focus on our breathing. And noticing every time we're breathing in and we're breathing out. If there is any thought popping into your mind, see if you can simply say thought. And then bring yourself back to paying attention to your breathing with gentleness. You can notice the quality of every time you're inhaling and you're exhaling. for the next couple of moments, I am going to invite you to recall one of those moments of a struggle you may have had this week. It can be because of the pandemic, because a moment of disappointment you have, a moment of frustration. See if you can recall one of those moments when you may have felt overwhelmed and stuck in a sticky situation. And as you recall this memory, see if you can bring it into your mind with many details as possible. See if you can see the colors of that particular moment, sounds, the time of the day, if there were people involved. And as you're holding it, I am going to invite you to notice what's showing up for you right now when you hold this memory of stuckness, this moment of a struggle you had. Maybe you can do a mini scanning in your body, starting in your head, noticing what's showing up there. Just can move through your neck, your shoulders, notice any physical sensation. And as you move through your body, if you notice any tension point, see if you can relax that area. And see if you can also check what's the feeling that is showing up for you. Can you give it a name? It doesn't have to be the perfect name, but just a name that will help you to watch this emotion right now. Can you localize the motion in your body? Is it moving? Is it static? If you were to give a color to this emotion, which color would that be? And see for a couple of moments you can watch this emotion as it is showing up in your body. And because emotions are all the time pushing us to do something, see if you can check what is the action that this emotion is pushing you to do. Is there any action that this emotion is asking you to do? And see if you can watch that as you're watching the emotion, watching how it feels in your body. Let's watch also the action that the emotion is pushing us to do. And as we continue with this exercise, see if you can let go of this memory and just check with yourself. What's the caring thing you can do for yourself? Given that there is this moment, or there was this moment of stuckness, given that you have watched the emotion that comes with it, given that you have watched the action that emotion pushes you to do, how would you like to show up to yourself when thinking about it? There are no right or wrong responses. We're just stepping back and really checking how we want to show up to that stressful moment and the memory that may come from that moment. And I'm going to invite you now to take 5 deep and slow breaths. You really do the best you can to focus your attention on your breathing right now. Inhaling deep and exhaling. And when you're ready, I invite you to be back into our session.
Wow, that was beautiful, Patricia. One thing I found when I was doing it is that breathing for me changed now, because it wasn't just a breathing exercise. That's now, I think, become for me one of those mini prompts, and I like that idea. I certainly feel more than ever that urge, that kind of urge that's associated with emotion. That you called it, that action that's associated with it. But yeah, sometimes I didn't really notice that. Even sometimes if I have a memory that makes me angry, for instance, then there's that urge to do something, that urge to take revenge, or that urge to do something, and now just sitting back and taking that kind of distance, which is a yucky feeling. It really is a yucky feeling, that the whole thing is. But that breathing becoming a prompt is fantastic. I really love that idea. Thank you very, very much for that. I really appreciate you doing that for us.
No, I appreciate it. I think something these days we're exposed to all types of upsetting situations because we're watching the news, because our mind again it's concerning about the future. We get trapped in the past, hoping that things were back to be before the pandemic. And reality is that the amount of stressors we're living with keeps going up. And these emotions are going to press the accelerator to do something. But we owe it to ourselves to do the best we can to check how do I want to show up to that. And I think it's not about doing it right or wrong. It's about building this flexible responding to those moments. Right? So that's the biggest invitation, right? Because I think sometimes my clients say, well, I didn't do it right, now what's wrong with me? Right? All the self-judgment comes. That I think the biggest thing is to practice this with a commitment to watch how it comes, not to do it right.
I love that idea of that, not to think that there's a right way or a wrong way to do it. Adam Layton says, love the question, what action is the emotion pushing us to do? Yeah, I agree with that. And what kind thing can you do? Thank you, he says. Also, he was asking before, how do you recognize which thoughts I should listen to and which ones maybe I shouldn't? How would we distinguish which ones which?
Yeah, Adam, thank you so much for the questions. And I'm glad that, Dov, you also know this super important. Any emotion that we experience, whether that's fear, anxiety, they do push us to do action, right? Academically, we call them these go-to actions or emotion-driven behaviors, right? But our task in our day-to-day life is to check, what's this emotion pushing me to do right now, right? In terms of the second question, how do we recognize which thought should I listen to or not? That's a beautiful question, because we have been raised and we have been socialized that thinking is this amazing and powerful and omnipotent thing to do. And notice how I say omnipotent with my hands, right?
Yeah.
Is right. And certainly thinking it is extremely handy for humanity, for evolution, for all types of things, right? At the same time, within ACT, we're always going to invite you to check in which context it's helpful. We call that workability, right? So the task is not to just venerate thinking and thinking like that, right? It's really about, let's just step back and check, right? If I get hooked on the thought that I'm a failure and then I withdraw and retract myself, is that helpful to me? If I get hooked and take this thought that says, it's going to be awful if this person gets close to me, is that helpful to me or not, right? They are not absolutes.
Yeah, it could be both ways.
That's right, can be, yes. So that's, I think, that is why flexibility is important, right? On that sense that we get exposed to all types of situations. The mind doesn't take breaks, doesn't take holidays, 24 hours, 7 days a week, blah, 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 chop, 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 yappy, yappy, right? And it's creating patterns of thinking, patterns of behaving. Our task is to check. In this moment, if I go along with this thought, does my life get better and richer? Do I become the person I want to be? So that's a micro decisions also that we make throughout the day, and especially when we're getting all types of, I think, stressful moments. Hopefully that's helpful.
Wonderful. So thinking is helpful, but sometimes overrated. And
Love it.
and I think, kind of like you said, in context, is it helpful to me? Is it not? Is it going to push me in the direction that I want to go, or is it going to take me away from it? And maybe that's how we can kind of be able to distinguish which thoughts are helpful for us and which aren't. Lorraine is saying, I think this method is very empowering as it's outs the person in control and identity, what the feeling is. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's been absolutely amazing. I wish I could go on talking to you all day. Actually, Patricia, it's incredible talking to you, and I love that. I love the you also broadcast this flexibility. It's not just about talking about it. You're fun to be with. It's amazing.
I appreciate it.
You put me in a good mood just chatting with you. It's absolutely fantastic, and it's unfortunate that we have to kind of get to the end of the program. What can we do? But Dr. Z, Patricia Zurita Ona, thank you very, very much for being my guest.
Dov, it has been a pleasure. I just want to say that when I got your email and over the last months, I'm very moved by what you're doing, creating a virtual space for actually people to share ideas and to just put a work out there. So tons of respect and appreciation for what you're doing. And thank you for having me. It was fun and great. Hopefully it was helpful. If people have any questions, you can just share my email or the website. I'm happy to get back to people.
Wonderful. It was absolutely amazing, not just useful, it was incredible. And thank you very much for joining me once again.
Thank you so much. Please stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.